I get the privilege of preaching the first preach of the new year. So this is a message that, so when you come to prepare a preach, there's a few different ways, just in case you wonder, that it works. One is that you've got a systematic preaching series, like when we did Mark. You've got a chapter and you've got to read through the chapter and find out what God's speaking through it. There's other times where it will be thematic and you might be going, we're going to talk about the gifts of the Spirit and look at the theme of the gifts of the Spirit. There's other ones that are inspirational, which is that we feel that God might give us a message for a specific time, for a specific place that is for that moment. And it's not based on something you've particularly read, but it's a feeling or a sense of what God is speaking. And so probably I'm going to preach this message 52 times this year, so hold on to it. I have had a nagging thought or phrase in my head probably for the last month. And I got the privilege as a great dad to build a trampoline yesterday in that freezing cold weather outside for 2 hours. And whilst I was out there, I was by myself, so over Christmas it's quite nice to have a little bit of time by myself. And this thought, this phrase kept coming back over and over and over again as I was praying into it. So this message is all based around this. And it's going to end with me explaining a bit more about this. But I really feel it's a message for us as a church family as we move into 2025. So if you want to take notes, please do. It is being recorded. So today's talk is called, I've lost my text. Look, this is that is terrible. That is not the text that was on there. Invitation, that's the title for today, so if you're taking notes, you can follow it through. It starts off with a bit of a game about who are these people and what's their link. So, everyone ready for the game?
Yeah.
Okay, we've got this person one. Their name is Steffi. We've got this person, number 2. This person's name is Ian. We have this, which is a youth camp. We have this guy called Ennie. We have question mark guy, because I don't know his name. And is there one more? Let me check. Who's that last picture of? Before I give her the answer. I can't even see it from here. And then we have all these people. Does anyone know what the link is between all of these people? Pardon? God? Yeah, he's definitely one of the links. Always the good answer. Jesus is definitely one of the links. So I'm going to take you through a bit of a story. This is Steffi. She was my friend from year, I'm guessing 5, all the way through until we left school. And she was at the school that I was at in my rough years, and I'll do my testimony at some point this year, but I was involved in gangs and all sorts of nonsense, wasn't a very nice person. Steffi, on the other hand, was the nicest, kindest, sweetest, 5'0" girl you've ever met, but she was one of my friends. And no matter what happened, her dad was actually the caretaker of the school we used to meet, and they used to live on site. But no matter what happened, no matter how bad it got, no matter how horrible I'd been, no matter where I was put, whether I was in isolation, public or private, whether I was put outside the head teacher's office, whether I was in suspension, no matter what it was, this thing would always happen. And there, through little glass windows, this tiny little girl would appear and say, "Hey Ben, are you alright?" Now sometimes I say, "I've been put in here and I've got no lunch, so could you bring me some lunch?" And with that, over the course of all of my school years, this other thing kept happening, which was this. "Hey Ben, are you going to come to youth on Thursday?" And probably, I reckon, 75% of the time, the answer was no. Whereas my invitation to Steffi to come out with my crazy mates was met with majority of the time a yes. And she'd be with us, but she'd never join in with all the craziness. She'd just be there, maybe stay for half an hour, then go home. But Steffi continually was just always inviting me to things. She's inviting me when people came to visit her from other places to her house at lunchtime, because her dad lived on site. You go to her house and have lunch in their house with the people who are visiting, who I might know. Whether it's to youth events or to church, whether it's to special things that was going on that we'd have to go to, there was always an invitation to me from Steffi for the whole of my senior school journey. And that sometimes was met with a yes, and I'd go to youth group on a Thursday night. Most of the time it was met with a no. But then, when I ended up in youth and I would turn up, this was the next person who I met. This guy called Ian. Ian was the youth worker at the church at the time. And I would just go on Thursday nights, but never go on a Sunday. Ian never once had a go at me about that. He didn't even question it. When I turned up on a Thursday, I was always met by Ian and Steffi and a few other key people in my life. But Ian was the person who helped me understand what salvation was. When I became a Christian at 17 years old, it was via really Ian sitting with us in this very unusual youth group that he decided that he would run, because we were a youth group that was 11 to 15, 15 to 16, 16 to 22. And there was loads of us. And every week he would sit down with us trying to tell us about the gospel, what it meant to follow Jesus, what it meant to be a Christian, what it meant to be a disciple. And it was through him that imparted to me this moment in which I decided I wanted to be a pastor, and it was down to him really helping me understand this call of God on my life. But if Stephanie hadn't invited me, I'd never met Ian. And Ian told me this thing that I have told hundreds, if not thousands of people, which is this: Ben, until you know what God wants you to do with your life, do youth work. And so at the age of 17, I was like, all right then, I'll be here every Thursday until I get something else come along. And so that's what I started to do. I started to do youth work. Ian then left that church when I was like 18, 19. I then took over the whole of youth work at that church. Steffi went to university. And then it was me. And I had the privilege of being in that church, leading an awesome youth group. And that led me to doing youth work for a long time. And I joined another church and I re-pioneered their youth work for them. And then what happened was I ended up here at a place called Cultivate, which is a youth camp that I used to help run with 8 other people. There was 500 to 600 kids would be there every year. And here I got the privilege of sharing an invitation to the gospel to hundreds of kids. And still to this day it amazes me at the places that I turn up across our network of Assemblies of God, and people say to me, "You've never met me before, but it was in one of your preachers I actually became a Christian." And I'm like, that must have been 10 years ago. They're like, yeah. And I said, "You didn't think about sending me a message, finding me on Facebook?" They're like, "No, I've just been going to church and it was in this place, I was there helping run a youth event." But why was I there? Because Ian had told me, until you know what else you're going to do youth work. But I was only met Ian because Steffi had told me, "Hey Ben, do you want to come?" And she faced, I couldn't even think of how many rejections, how many times I told no. I can't imagine now I've got my own kids, how they feel when they invite their friends to church who don't come. But yet, determined, she kept inviting. Then it comes to this guy down here, a guy called Ennie. He has actually been over once or twice to visit me. Ennie became a Christian at Cultivate. He was in my youth group. I don't know what's magic about youth camps, but I preached the same gospel there as I did there, and there he got saved, but at home he didn't. And he became a Christian. He's now a chemical engineer. He's been down in Southampton and he lives in Birmingham now. Ennie rings me up and we talk probably every 2 or 3 months, have a really good chat. I'm basically one of his adopted dads because his dad left him. So he'd ring me up and say, "Ben, how do I use a drill? How do I hang a picture up? I want to make this thing for my mum for Mother's Day. Could you come around and help me?" Rang me up and said, "I'm about to buy a car, Ben. If I video call you, could you tell me if it's a good car or not?" I felt like it was a lot of responsibility because I'm not a mechanic and it was just over the phone. And this is Ennie. And do you know what I told Ennie? Ennie, until you know the call of God in your life, do youth work. That's what I told him. So he went to Birmingham for the first time on his own as an 18-year-old guy at university. Oh, the first thing I told him was this: Ennie, you've got to go to church. When you get to university, the first thing you need to tell everyone in the conversation is, "Hi, I'm Ennie," and you tell him you're a Christian, so it doesn't become awkward in a month's time when suddenly you're like, "I'm a Christian." Find a church and serve in your church. And if you don't know what to do youth work. So Ennie went up to Birmingham, and then Ennie rang me one day and he said, "Ben, I've just met this guy. I can't even remember what his name is. I've met this guy, he's become a Christian, I was talking to him. And now I'm trying to do what you did for me and I'm trying to disciple him now." But the reality is, this guy just here, who we don't even know, haven't got a picture of him, he only became a Christian because Ennie was willing to spend time and energy talking to him. But Ennie became a Christian because at Cultivate, he heard the gospel, God touched his heart and transformed it, and in a moment he wanted to know everything about Jesus. But the only reason I was there at a youth conference getting to be able to talk was because this guy Ian told me that the only reason, until you know the call of God in your life, Ben, do youth work. So that's what I did. But the only reason I met Ian was because Steffi kept inviting me to church and faced rejection hundreds of times. Over the course of, how long were you at senior school for? Quick maths, 5 years? Is that how long you were at senior school? Anyone? 5 years? I left, I got kicked out at 16, so I only did a couple of years. So these guys here, and then what happens is this. This is you. Sorry if you're not in the picture. We'll take another picture and do it next time. These are the people right now. But I came to the Isle of Wight because I felt a call of God on my life whilst I was doing youth work and becoming an assistant pastor. And I felt God saying to me, Ben, I want you to move to the Isle of Wight and plant a church. And so did my wife Emma and our kids. So what we decided was, it's probably a good idea to do what God says. And we turned up, just me and Emma, and then we met Jonathan and Sandra and loads of other people. We started to think and invite them along. And then they invited other people, and then the people you'll sit next to, they're invited by someone else. But the reality is, this only exists because this guy became a Christian because that guy got an invitation to know Jesus. But he only became a Christian because he went to a youth conference where I was doing a talk about Jesus and the gospel. But the only reason I was there was because Ian told me about the gospel, told me about the fact that until you've got a full-time call in your life, Ben, you will do youth work because that's the place we need to be. It's better doing something than nothing. Serve Jesus. I was like, okay, Ian, that's what I do. But the only reason I met Ian who told me that was because Steffi had invited me to church. That is my story. There is hundreds of people in between each of these phases. But these are the key people. I used to text Steffi once a year because she lived in London, I lived in Essex, now I live here. And I used to thank her that she never gave up. Because Steffi doesn't realise this, that all of you guys are here really because of her. Steffi doesn't realise that Annie got saved and got to have a dad for 5 years in me because she invited me to church. She doesn't realise that I got to speak at a youth conference to 600 kids and that have all become Christians and are following their faith and are trying to find a way to serve Jesus. And the reality is I could have put loads of pictures here of people whose lives have been impacted because one person just said, do you want to come to church? Not once, not twice, hundreds of times. And the reality is when I went back to church, do you know who was there? Steffi. Do you know who I sat next to for the first 4 weeks of going to church? Steffi. Do you know who taught me the etiquette of youth work? Steffi. Because the reality is when I turned up there, she was there. And she had time for me. She had space for me. She introduced me to my best friends. She introduced me to the friends that would transform my life. She introduced me to people who would have super influence on me. And the reality is, Steffi is a quiet, shy girl who became friends with the school bully and realised that, imagine he came to Jesus, what could it do? And whenever I get in contact with these people, whenever I talk to them, I can't think of all the ripples that have been sown just because of an invitation. So the link is me, just in case you're still wondering. And the reality is we don't understand the effects it can have when we determine to go in one direction and say, Jesus, this is what I'm called to do, this is where I'm going. And I thank God for these people because I look at people like Annie and where he is right now in the world and the fact that he's trying to find out how in chemical engineering on oil rigs he can serve Jesus. I can't help but be excited by this girl called Evie who texted me at Emma once and said, I'm applying to be a missionary in Manchester for 2 years, would you fill out my form for me and give me a reference? And the reality is, it's all because someone took a risk once and said, do you want to come? If an invitation was never given, you would never be here. If you weren't invited, you wouldn't be here. And some of you might have been invited and thought you're never going to go. And now you're here. Some of you might have been eager and ready for an invitation to church and like, here I am, I'm coming. For some of you, it might have taken a year or 2 years, 6 months, a whole lifetime. But the reality is the invitation opened a door to something in your life that when you turned up, there was a moment in that time in which Jesus became real for you. I can tell you this, when I turned up to church when Steffi invited me, Jesus wasn't real to me. He wasn't. It was an organisation. I walked in, I sat down, I sang songs, I went home. What happened though in the midst of that was I met Jesus and he met me. I found out he loves me and he cares for me, he's got a plan for me. And the best thing for me, that still to this day I still can't get my head around, is that he'll be with you even to the end of this age. And I had enough in my brain at that moment when someone said that at the front of the church was this sounds like a really good deal. That you're telling me for the rest of my life I can have love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control. I only learned that in the last 5 years. At the time I was just like, I just want love. But you're telling me that I can always have that. That I don't have to keep coming back here every week to get it. That there's not some sort of weird contract, but God is always going to be, if I accept him and let him be the Lord of my life, he's always going to be with me. And it's in that moment I said, God, if that's the deal, I'm in. And from that point onwards, he's always been with me. There's no place I'd rather be than in church with people who love him. No place I'd rather be than trying to help people understand this. Because the reality is we don't understand the impact of an invitation. I don't know if you guys have heard of this guy, Albert McMahon. Mackin, we'll call him that. Anyone know who he is? It's alright if you do, you can shout it out. I'd be proud you've been in church for so long. Anyone know who he is? He's a young farmer in the early 40s. He is a young farmer who got radically saved in a huge evangelistic campaign in America. And so what he did was, he got saved in this campaign, and he was a young farmer. So what he started to do was say to people, who wants to come? I've got a little truck. We'll fit in as many people as we can, and you can come with me. And so he'd just invite people to come to these campaigns, and they'd all come. And people would get saved, some people wouldn't get saved, and some people would say no. But there's one young man who just kept saying no. And he always had excuses. There's always a girl, somewhere to go, somewhere to be, something to see. But Albert, a little bit like Steph, he didn't give up. And he realised that this young man could drive but didn't have a car. So he said, why don't you drive us there in the truck and you can drive? And so he drove him there, he stood at the back of the meeting and he started to hear the gospel. And so he went back every night after that because he was more and more intrigued around this concept of if God is really real, what could it mean? And so at the back of this meeting he started to listen, and eventually he goes to the front and he gets saved, and this man becomes Billy Graham, who becomes the most influential man probably of the last 100 years. He had the privilege of, in his leadership, meeting with every president until Barack Obama. Some of them he was close, intimate friends with, and he would pray for them and get to talk to them. They'd bring him up for advice. He got to do the first huge TV campaigns. He went around the world spreading the gospel to thousands, if not millions of people. People in this room here have been saved because of Billy Graham Crusades. Net Church in Dartford, that partnering with us and loving us and care for us, who... they came over with Jaya to come and see us. Their leaders got saved at a Billy Graham crusade. And they ran to the front. As two graphic designers in their 30s, they ran to the front and got saved. And then they've planted a church that's reaching thousands of people. But Billy Graham would never have been there without Albert. And all Albert did was say, do you want to come? And he didn't give up. He didn't say, oh, he said no once. He tried to find ways. He tried to find something. And he found driving a car to church was the thing that would get him in there. And then the interest grew because he thought to himself, if this is really real, this is life transformational. And so that's Albert. So hopefully you'll never forget him. If I ask again, you'll all be like, was that the Billy Graham guy? And you'll be like, I can't remember. And there's a little synopsis of his life. And we come to this great Bible verse that I'm going to spend a little bit of time in, but not loads of it. Matthew 22, 1-14. Jesus also told them other parables. He's talking to the Pharisees. It's probably, if you want to read it, 21 through to 23 are probably three of the greatest chapters in terms of illustrations he gives us in Jesus' teachings. And this is one of them. He said, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a king who prepared a great wedding feast for his son. When the banquet was ready, he sent his servants to notify those who were invited, but they all refused to come. So he sent other servants to tell them, the feast has been prepared, the bulls and the fattened cattle have been killed, and everything is ready. Come to the banquet. But the guests he invited ignored them and went their own way, one to this farm and one to the other business. Others seized his messengers, insulted them and killed them. The king was furious, and he sent out his army to destroy the murderers and to burn down their towns. And he said to the servant, the wedding feast is ready, and the guests I invite aren't worthy of honour. Now go out to the street corners and invite everyone you see. So the servants brought in everyone they could find, good and bad alike, and the banquet hall was filled with guests. But the king came in to meet the guests. He noticed the man who wasn't wearing the proper clothes for a wedding. Friend, he asked, how is it that you are here without wedding clothes? But the man had no reply. Then the king said to his aide, bind his hands and feet and throw him out to the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen. This is, we can spend a long time on this. This has kind of two key areas to it. One in its original application and one in its application today. This is talking about the fact that the king is obviously God, the son who is getting married is Jesus, the bride is the church. They're the key areas for us to understand. The other key aspect for us to understand is this is talking about the Jewish people who have rejected Jesus, who have killed Jesus, who are going to deny him. This is about the prophets who have come before, who have come to warn them about the coming of the Messiah. And in Matthew 22, Jesus is trying to help them understand, so they might turn to him again, that actually they've rejected him. But there's still this moment in which they just kill the prophets, deny him, and we know obviously what comes after this is actually the crucifixion of Jesus. But also here we understand that there's something happening here where there is a transition from the invited to the everyone. To the invited to the everyone. And we come to this bit here, and he said to his servants, the wedding feast is ready, and the guests I invited are unworthy of honor. Now go out to the street corners and invite everyone you see. So the servants brought in everyone they could find, good and bad alike, and the banquet hall was filled with guests. And the reality is we move here from a select few who are invited, who would have been the Jewish nation, to what is going to become everyone. And what the beautiful thing about this is that is you and me. And I don't know about you, but when I was invited, I think the category I'd fall into wouldn't be the good category. I think it'd be the bad category. But yet, Steffi kept inviting me. Kept saying, do you want to come? Do you want to come to youth group? Do you want to come to this thing? Do you want to come to this youth event? Do you want to come to church on Sunday? Do you want to come to this thing? Do you want to come to that thing? And eventually, I decided actually it'd be good to go. And the beautiful thing about this picture is, and the beautiful thing that this leaves us with is that it is already done. It's not turn up to the feast because it's nearly ready. It's not turn up because we're about to kill them. No, it's actually turning up because the food is ready, the banquet is prepared, the wedding is about to take place, and actually when they turn up, the preparation is already done. All that needs to go out is the what? The invite. Because everything else is prepared, because that is the gospel. The gospel is an invitation to something that is already completed. And like we talked about before, it's like a gift, it's like a wrapped present. It's already there, it's already waiting, and it gets given to us all. But I cannot force you to open it, as you'll know at Christmas. I cannot force you to wear the thing I've given you. I cannot force you to like it. What I can say, though, is that here is a gift for you. What do you want to do with it? And so when we get to this picture, what we realise is that when we fall into this part just here, this is kind of like the key part I want us to kind of remember this morning is that the servant was never reprimanded for the people who didn't come. Doesn't happen. What happens in the story is what? Go and tell these people. He comes back and says they don't come. He doesn't say, well, you're a terrible servant, why didn't you make them come? He says, go back again. And so he goes back again. And when he comes back a third time, and still they're not coming, and some of them are now being killed, what happens the next time around? What does he say to him? You're a terrible servant, your invitation must be awful. You must be really bad at this job, because surely they'd want to come. No. What does he say? He enlarges the group that can be invited, and he says, everyone. Put your hand up if you're part of everyone. It's all of you, just in case you were confused. Everyone. And so we get to this moment where what we have to realise about the gospel is it is for everyone. I thank Jesus every day that Stephanie didn't say, Ben's too bad for an invite. I thank God for the church I went to, who had to put up with me for that first year, who were trying to figure it all out. I thank God they kept inviting me back to things, to their house. I don't know why they invited me to their houses, for dinner and for coffee and to talk about life, but they did. And the reality is this is the moment we find ourselves in. And this morning as I've been praying, that's kind of like the key point I want us to get to. And so I've kind of tried to help us a little bit understand this, is that I want us to understand, hear this in the right way, this is not an invitation just to church. Okay, that is part of it. So I've kind of helped, maybe a helpful illustration for you is this. Anyone know what this is? Magazine. Yeah, this is something that I think might only be a rarity nowadays. But when I used to go to the dentist, there was a table with magazines on. The hairdressers I go to, there is a table with magazines on. And as you sit in the waiting room of the reception, you have this pile of defensive magazines that people don't talk to you. And you have some that you pick up and the person next to you is like, oh, that looks really interesting. They start to talk to you. And so the first part of invitation I want us to think about is the magazine table invitation. Strangers you just bump into. People you just coincidentally are next to. People who are just in that reception area, just in that Sainsbury's queue, and it's a random mishmash of things, and you're just sat there because some of the invitation is going to be just random. You find yourself in a place around a magazine table, you're sitting next to someone. The question is, are we thinking, how can I get through this? Or are we thinking, how can I invite someone? And that can be literally anyone, anywhere, anytime. It is the random invitation to church. My old pastor had two aunties, and they were driving down the road once, and they said, please stop. So my pastor Pete pulled over. They were by that stage in their late 60s, early 70s, and they ran through a field together, and there was a farmer out by himself. And they stood there, and they gave her a gospel tract, they prayed with him, and they left. And they said, who knows if we might be the only people who ever to share the gospel and invite them to church, and it's the least we could have done. And I think that's so true, isn't it? What is the least we could do in those moments? Just an invitation to church, just an invitation for a coffee. So the next place we go to is the next table. Who knows what this table could be? The coffee table. This is that next step on from the random meeting of people who you might invite to actually a moment of closer conversation. With me, when I meet with people, I've got friends who our conversation is always at the coffee table because I love coffee. But here what it is actually what can happen is we can meet people at the magazine table, and the invitation, like I said earlier, isn't just come to church. We have to start to break that mindset. The conversation could be, hey, do you want to grab a coffee at some point? Because there are so many people out there who have no friends, no one to talk to, no one to open up about. And maybe at the magazine table there is something there that you think, actually, this conversation needs to move from a magazine table in a dentist where I've got an appointment in 5 minutes to maybe a one-off half-an-hour coffee. I have had coffee with random people one time and never met them again. Because they got off their chest what they wanted to talk about. But I've got other people who that coffee table is where we have talked, where they've asked me questions. I had a friend who I hadn't seen for 10 years. His mum passed away and he wanted to meet with me. And we spent 6 weeks over a coffee table. Just talking, just listening to his worries, listening to his concerns. But the reality is I didn't just leave people at the magazine table. I want to think, is there something else I can do to take them to a coffee table conversation? These are people maybe you work with friends. And then we move on to the next table, which is this table. Dinner table. This dinner table is the place where are our most intimate and close relationships. They're our friends and our family. But the reality is, we have to get used to the fact that some of our coffee table friends might need to become dinner table friends. Because for them, maybe there needs to be a moment in which we're invested in them more than just a cup of coffee, but we're saying, would you come and see my world? Because in the coffee shop, what we see is you and me. In your house, what they see is your world. And they start to see things they might not have ever seen before. It might be in that place where their barriers are broken down for the gospel. It might be in that place where they sit to ask their difficult questions they never asked you before. It might be in that place where they see your family working together and go, I wish I could have what you've got. And then in those moments you can tell them what it is you've got is Jesus. But the reality is maybe some of your magazine table friends will come straight dinner guests. Because the reality is when we sit with people, when we're listening to people, there might be a moment where you're just like, you know what, I think what they need is just a good family dinner. And afterwards you might sit at your dining room table and share the gospel with them. Or maybe they might just become a friend for a while. But the reality is, this is our responsibility. Only you can invite people to coffee. I can't be with you all the time. I can't be in your work canteen with you, saying, just wait here. Would you go out for coffee with this person, please? Thank you very much. I can't be in your classroom. I can't be in your street. I can't be on the beach with you. But what we should be thinking is, this person opposite from me, what sort of invitation do they need? And some of them, it could just stay at a magazine conversation. But maybe your magazine conversation in a dentist and an invite to church leads them back to a dinner table with their other friend who is a Christian. And it's the first time their Christian friends had an opportunity to share the gospel because they're saying, I met this random person at the beach and they gave me this invitation to church. What's all that about? That seems a bit mental. And maybe that's their first ever in where they say, actually, I'm a Christian and that's why you're here, because I want you to know that you're loved and you're cared for and there's a place for you. But if we all play our part with the invitation, hopefully it leads to the great invitation, which is communion table. A place where we take it from being just about invitation, but an invitation to something far greater than this. An invitation where at the dinner table you might explain to them The reason I'm saved isn't because I'm awesome. The reason I'm saved isn't because I'm perfect. I'm not saved because of my money. I'm not saved because I've given you dinner. None of this was about me getting saved. I'm saved because of grace, which means it's unmerited, unfavoured. And it's at this place where we hope to get all people to come to that wedding feast, where they can feast on all the things that Jesus has done for them, in his death and resurrection. When Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, there is no other way to the Father but through me. This is the point we want all people to have that choice, where we can give them that present and say, this is what we believe. And some people will open it and say, I want to believe too. I want to make Jesus the Lord of my life, and I want to open that gift. For other people, they'll hold it for a while. And many of you will recognise that. You held that gift. You are going back to the dinner table and saying, there's this gift that you've explained to me and I've got some more questions. But if we take away the dinner table, where do the questions get asked? If we take away the coffee table, where does the conversation even begin? But the reality is our invitation has to be us making a deliberate choice in our life saying, I want to have a life sitting with people, listening with people. It's going to get messy, I can guarantee it. Broken people sitting at your table in pain and hurt, who are crying because they're lost, their grief, their pain, crying because they don't understand what they're going to do with the rest of their life. But the reality is we're always just pointing them on. And one of the greatest things we can learn is to sit with people. And it doesn't take you too long to close your eyes and think about the gospel and realise what Jesus mainly did was invite them to sit with him. Whether it was the thousands on the mountainside, whether it was in a small room, in an upper room before he dies, the invitation was to be with me. Our memory verse that we're going to try and do a memory verse every week is just this memory verse that if we can just have this echoing in the back of our mind. Now go up to the street corners and invite everyone you see. So the servant brought in everyone they could find, good, bad, alike. And the banquet hall was filled with guests. This is our part to play. You're not making the feast. You're not sacrificing the bulls. You're not doing any of that. Our job is this. Invite everyone. Good and bad. We can't choose who gets invited. We just say, do you want to come? And like I said, this isn't just about getting them to church. It's about starting a conversation. Some people, they might just come straight to church because they've had all those conversations for years and they get to that moment where suddenly it's like, yeah, you know what, I want to come. I want to find out more. I want to push into this. If this is real, it has an eternal consequence and I want to push into it. And it kind of leads into this, all of this talk and all this preach today leads on from what God has been saying to me, I think about this year. A year of invitation. Creating a culture of invitation. I feel that God is saying to us, this is a year we set a cultural marker for the future of Altitude Church. That at Altitude, we invite everyone. We break the fear of rejection and replace it with the truth. We are fully accepted by God. Our intention is to reach an island for Jesus, but that will never happen unless we invite them. And just this phrase here has just been going on. A year of invitation. A year of invitation. Ben, a year of invitation. Building that trampoline 1,000 times. Ben, a year of invitation. What would it look like if we decided right now to say, you know what, this next year, I'm just going to invite everyone. Just like at the banquet. That I'm just going to be someone who invites people. I'm going to be that person that just invites people. And the reality is, what I realised in doing this is, one of the greatest things Steffi did was this. She realised I was never rejecting her, I was just rejecting the invitation. Whereas so many of us, when someone says no, they don't want to come, we think they're rejecting us. But when I said to Steffi, I don't want to go, do you know what happened after that? She sat down with the salt and vinegar crisp she'd got me and we had lunch together. And we talked about anything and everything. And then she'd invite me to her house for dinner. And she'd say again, Ben, do you want to come to youth on Thursday night? And do you know what I said? No. But she knew I wasn't rejecting her. She knew I was just rejecting the invitation. And we have to get used to the fact that not everyone is going to want to come every time. But what we can start to do is to break this fear of rejection. That we feel somehow that when someone says, no, I don't want to come, what they're saying is, I hate you, I don't like you, I don't want to be near you. No, what they're saying is, I don't want to go to that other place. And that can happen anywhere along that journey. It could happen right at the magazine stage. Where they're like, oh, I'm not interested in this religion stuff, can you just be quiet? Yeah, no worries. It could happen at the coffee stage. As you're having that conversation, you bring up about your faith, about church, about what God's done for you. At that point, they say, you know what, can we just keep talking about this other thing? Because that's really what I want to talk about. And that's fine. It could happen at the dinner table. But the reality is, what it looked like 100 times later when they actually say, yes, I do want to be a Christian. Yes, I have seen all this stuff you've said. Yes, I want to believe it. Because that's what happens, is that when we say yes to saying, I'm going to be someone who just invites and invites and invites, until a whole island is invited. And that's invited them to magazines, coffees, dinners, to church. It's to all those things. And I want it to be this, and it is actually a little bit backwards in this church. Our kids have no problem with this. That's why our kids ministry is massive. My Judah put an invitation in every Christmas card he sent at school to come to the Christmas events. Do you know how many kids came? None. Do you know what he said? I can't wait for Easter. Because he knows what they're rejecting is just the event, not him. And then what happens is, what do you think happened when Judah did it? Asher was like, that looks like a good idea. But he had Judah telling him, it doesn't matter if they don't come, what matters is that we're inviting them. And if we can grasp that mentality as a church, I want us to be that it's so unusual not to invite people to stuff. That we're so used to people saying, no, I don't want to come. But what we're thinking is, imagine for the next year, each of us invites one person to church every week. Normally there's about 50 of us. So every week, 50 people for 52 weeks of the year. What would it look like if just 1% came, 10% came? Just imagine, just one person came. Was their eternal salvation worth it? Probably not. Maybe it was, you know what, does it matter anyway? Of course it matters. And I love the fact that we're a place where people can meet Jesus. But I really feel God is calling us that this truly is a moment in time for Altitude where God is saying, what sort of church are you going to be? Because do you know what's weird is everyone's doing it, no one feels weird about doing it. It's true, isn't it? You go to a party, you don't want to be the first person to do anything. But as soon as 5 people are doing it, you're a part of a crowd. And you can write it out together. And I want us to be a church where we're saying, who are my magazine people right now? Who are the people I need to have a coffee with? Who are the people I need to have around my dinner table? Who are the people that need the invitation to Alpha, to Soul Food? Who are the people that need the invitation to come to church on Sunday morning? Who are those people? But the reality is, our job is to invite. I want it to be that when our kids grow up, when in 50 years' time, that's not even a conversation to be had. Everyone is just thinking, yeah, I'll invite these people. And some of you already have that in you. Some of you are doing it. Whenever there's an event, you come to me at the end, you're like, could I have 10 flyers? Could I have 5 flyers? Because what you're thinking is, I want to be invitational. And I want to say to you as a church that I really feel that this year is going to be a landmark moment for the rest of Altitude's future. If we say this is who we are. This is what we're going to be, because the island needs Jesus. Unless they get invited, they ain't coming. They're not. And it is our job. Jesus has got the banquet. Jesus has made a way. He's done everything. Our point is just saying, would you like to come? We need to get over our fear of rejection.